On today's Locked On Jayhawks, we preview Kansas Baylor. After all they've done, they have to win this game, right?
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. You can find me on Twitter at DJohnsonRadio, Blue Sky Derek Johnson. And this is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to the everydayers who have caught each and every show. We are free and available everywhere you get your podcasts. You can also find us on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. We're going to be previewing Kansas Baylor on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. If you're looking for the basketball preview for KU's next game against Furman, we released that on Thursday on Thanksgiving, so check that one out as well. But Kansas has done all this work just to get back within a game of having a chance at bowl eligibility, beating three straight ranked opponents. Is it all going to come crashing down at Baylor, or can they get it done? It would feel right if they can get this thing accomplished. So we're going to get to the headlines of the game, Baylor scouting report, matchups of the game, players to watch on this episode of the show, which is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. This is an 11 a.m. game, Kansas in Waco, and our first headline is KU trying to win in Waco for the first time ever. Now, Kansas has done a lot of things, a lot of firsts, I guess you could say, under Lance Leipold, right? I mean, they've won three straight ranked games. Kansas has never won two consecutive straight ranked games, right? That's a first this year under Lance Leipold. Making back-to-back bowl games and accomplishing all these things with back-to-back seasons with whatever it was, like 4-0, 5-0 starts, having college game day for the first time. They've done so many firsts for this program already. And obviously they're going for the first of trying to make their third consecutive bowl game, trying to make KU history, right? And Kansas trying to make other history in that they have never won in Waco. And in addition to that, it has been a tough go of it for Kansas against Baylor in general. Baylor has won 13 straight games against Kansas, and every game that has been played during that stretch of winning 13 straight in Waco has been decided by a minimum of 12 points. That game that was 35-23 in Lance Leipold's, what would that have been, second year in 2022 here at Kansas, that was the closest game that Kansas played against Baylor in over a decade in Waco. So this has not been a good matchup for KU. It has not been a place they've had a lot of success. They're trying to accomplish history there. And like I said earlier, also trying to accomplish history and being the first Kansas team to make it to three consecutive bowl games, playing for bowl eligibility. And the tough thing here is that Baylor's going to be highly motivated. You know, before the season started, we wondered if this would be a situation where by this point in the season, maybe Dave Aranda would be gone. He was on the hot seat before the season started, but they've righted the ship. Baylor is one of the hottest teams in the conference as well, just like Kansas. I mean, these are... If the Big 12 had a playoff, like forget the college football play, if the Big 12 just had a playoff, like Baylor and Kansas would be two teams that a lot of teams across the conference would be like, I don't want to draw them. You know, these are two of the hottest teams in the conference right now. And for Baylor, they still have an outside shot at making it to the Big 12 title game. They need a win and they need a lot of other stuff to happen, but it's possible. And it's senior day to them, and they've righted the ship under Dave Aranda. So they have plenty of motivation. This is not going to be a game about, you know, motivation, this or that. For Kansas, you're going to have to get back up off the mat after having a very emotional game on senior day, winning your third straight ranked game, and it's an 11 a.m. game on the road. That makes it difficult here for KU. Beyond all that, I guess you have a little bit of an interesting headline here with Jeff Grimes against Baylor, his former employer, and in fact, his former boss that fired him in Dave Aranda. Now, this can go both ways. This can go the way of Baylor is going to know everything that Dave Aranda wants to do, and it's not going to be great for the KU offense. It can also go the other way and say that Jeff Grimes knows everything Dave Aranda and the Baylor defense wants to do, and he'll know how to counter that. You could look to the BYU game and say, well, BYU knows Jeff Grimes well, and Kansas won that game. You can also look to it, though, and say that the Kansas offense, only scored, 17 points in that game. So I don't know how that's going to work out, but certainly if I was Jeff Grimes, I got fired by Baylor, maybe it was scapegoated a little bit. I don't know. Maybe it was, deservedly so because the offense wasn't performing. I don't necessarily know that it was all his fault. They had like a billion freshmen in the two deep on the offensive line. Not a good place to have a lot of freshmen. But, he obviously wants to show out in a real way in this one. And if he can relay any extra intel and information for the rest of KU in this one, that would obviously be very beneficial. Maybe he's able to know certain things about what Dave Aranda wants to do, and maybe Kansas is able to have other minds like Jim Zabrowski kind of come in, and Lance Leipold come in and say, hey, we're going to do some twists on some of the things you're doing so that we're not overly predictable of things that they think you're going to do. I don't know. As far as the Baylor scouting report, they come in at 7-4 on the season. They are 5-3 in Big 12 play so far this season. And like I said, they're red hot. They've won 5 consecutive games after a 2-4 start and an 0-3 start in conference play. 4 of those 5 games, too, have come by them winning by double digits. And 3 of the 5 games have come on the road. Now, none of them have come, against teams that, if you're looking at the mini helmets over my shoulder, like, it's not coming against BYU and Colorado, but there still are some teams in there, like West Virginia, for instance, that Kansas lost to, right? So, you take care of business, you beat the teams you're supposed to, and they have been a very hot team. And they're led by a new offensive coordinator this year, obviously, Jeff Grimes over at Kansas now, Jake Spavital, who's had a long career through the coaching ranks of college football. And he has had a fantastic season, enough so that, it seems like there could be a head coaching job in his future, maybe even a bigger offensive coordinator job that they're going to have to, fend off to keep him for. And Sawyer Robertson, who was the former Mississippi State transfer, didn't have a great year last year, kind of in the same bucket as like Jake Retzlaff, where he comes back and there are questions. The stats aren't like maybe great the year before, and they've had phenomenal seasons. And for Robertson, there's a real case to be made that he is the best quarterback in the Big 12 so far this season. His total QBR is an 83. That leads the Big 12. Now, maybe you'd still take Shedeur Sanders. Maybe the way Jalon Daniels has played over these past 5 games looks like the guy we're used to, that you would take him. I don't know. But Sawyer Robertson, the overall body of work for this season, has shown that he has been one of the most productive quarterbacks in the conference and in the country. The Bears are 3rd in the Big 12, 33.7 points per game. They are 6th, though, in yards per play, 7th in yards per game. So by the yard numbers, they're slightly above average in the Big 12. By points, though, they're one of the best in the Big 12. And you look at it, they're very balanced on the offensive side of the ball. They are 5th in yards per rush, averaging 4.8 yards per carry. They have, it's really a stable of backs, but the main 2, Bryson Washington, he has over 800 yards, and Dawson Pendergrass has over 500. Those 2 have been really good. And then they're 5th in yards per pass, like I said, very balanced. They are only 10th in completion rate, but they're 3rd in passing efficiency. So if the completion rate is lower, yet they're in the top 5 in yards per pass and really good in passing efficiency, it tells me that A, they're not really throwing interceptions, and B, that they're not, one of these teams who's just going to dink and dunk across the field. When they're throwing, they're gaining some decent chunks when they're completing them, because, you don't rank in the top 5 in yards per pass while being 10th in completion rate unless you're doing just that. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, Baylor ranks 10th in the league at giving up 26 points per game. They're also 10th in yards allowed per play and per game. So they've been, I would say, a below average defense in Big 12 play, but they've been good against the run, and therein lies a possible problem for Kansas. They're 5th in yards per carry allowed at just 3.8 yards per carry. And that number, if you're looking at defensive success rate against the run, they are 6th nationally. So this has been a really good run defense for Baylor. Now, we've seen other good run like Colorado had a good run defense on paper. Kansas didn't care. Because sometimes when you are so good at something, even if the opponent is good at it, you might still be better than them. So there's a chance Kansas can still have success running the football, but it is something to keep in the back of your mind that maybe Baylor does end up having the goods for slowing down the run. Now, they are just 9th in yards allowed per pass. They are a little bit better, 6th in completion rate allowed, and they're 8th in passer efficiency allowed. But they've been an overall good run defense and a balanced offense. Now, the importance of this game, I feel like it's unsaid. Like, I don't need to make a bowl game. Like, it, no matter what, the season, you've salvaged it a little bit, right? You were able to make a lot of great memories for a lot of people and have all these ranked wins and have these fun moments and fun Saturdays. But there still is going to feel like a little bit of if you lose this game, what could have been. And all those past games that you lost early in the season, the what ifs about this or that, if it could have happened. If you win this game, I think a lot of those go away. Like, yes, you could do the what ifs of, but if 3 of those changed, or if 2 of those changed, maybe you're in a Big 12 title game. It's a little bit different, though, when it's a standpoint of like, hey, you're still 6-6. Usually it'd take like 9-3 to get to the Big 12 title game, where it's like, you're asking for a lot of what ifs to change. You make a bowl game, you don't have to what if it, like you are in a bowl game. And it just feels like it would be fitting. It would be fitting the way that Kansas has turned around this season for them to finish on a high, to do something they've never done, win in Waco, to do something the program has never done and go to 3 straight bowl games. But you got to do it on the field. It's going to be tough. Baylor's a good opponent, and go out with a bang for the senior class. But I'll say this above all, the importance of the game. From a fan perspective, enjoy what you have, because you don't know you're going to win this game. You don't know you're going to get another game for a bowl game. And even if you do win this game and get a bowl game, there's no guarantee that certain seniors, wouldn't opt out like we saw last year with Dominic Pooney and Austin Booker of the bowl game where you didn't get to see them again. So point being, enjoy the seniors, enjoy the guys that you might, not ever get to see play again in a Kansas uniform, soak it up and enjoy that moment. And you just hope like heck that they can put a storybook ending to this phenomenal run. All right, let's continue on our matchups of the game. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Our episode today is brought to you by Game Time, which is a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. They have seat views where you can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Maybe you're going down to Waco for this game. You're touring the Dr. Pepper factory, but you haven't gotten tickets to the game yet because you're like, I'm just going to scalp. I'll get them the day of or the day before when I'm down there. Or maybe you're looking to get them, before you go down there, the day before, something like that. Well, pull up Game Time. You might not know the stadium very well. Get the panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Thank you for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. You can check out Locked On College Football for your second listen, Locked On College Basketball for your third. Check out the Kansas Furman preview that we did for that Saturday night basketball game for KU and Allen Fieldhouse as well. All right, matchups of the game for Kansas and Baylor. First down, getting pressure on and being aggressive, blitzing Sawyer Robertson. You look at the numbers when Robertson is kept clean. He is completing 67% of his passes versus when he's under pressure, it's 36%. That is a stark difference. The yards per attempt goes from 8.6 to 6.2. The turnover-worthy play rate jumps from 2.3% to 7.3%. So basically tripling, even more than tripling. The Pro Football Focus passing grade goes from 83.1 to 55.5. And the NFL passer rating goes from 114 to 53. All of those numbers across the board are not just worse. They are significantly worse when he is under pressure. And of course, you can point to like every quarterback in the country and be like, every quarterback is going to be worse under pressure. And yes, that is true. But it's not always this stark. Like last week when we talked about getting pressure on Shedeur Sanders, we mentioned when Shedeur Sanders is kept clean, 8.6 yards per attempt. When he's under pressure, 7.7. So like there's a difference there, but it's less than a yard. This is over 2 yards in addition to all those other numbers that are so different. And like Shedeur Sanders is still over 50% completion rate under pressure. Sawyer Robertson is under 40%. So it is a very stark difference between the two. Can you get to Robertson? And unlike last week, where Sanders had actually had really good numbers against the blitz, you basically were relying on, can you get to Sanders without blitzing a ton? Robertson's turnover-worthy throw rate triples against the blitz so far this season, and his completion rate is 56%. So I think Brian Borland needs to have an aggressive game plan on this one for KU. Go after the quarterback, blitz him, hit him, get him under pressure. And beyond the blitz, KU needs to get backside pressure. Baylor's left tackle, Caden Siraki, he has just a 48 Pro Football Focus grade. He is the weak link on the offensive line. He is better in pass block than run block, actually a 62 in pass block, so at least, kind of below average there. But the right side of the line has been better, so you have to take advantage of that backside if you're KU in the rush. So Jeremy Robinson, Dean Miller, who was ever lined up back there, you got to have a day. Second down, Kansas pass block versus the Baylor blitz. Baylor is fourth in the Big 12 in sacks, but when you look at Pro Football Focus, they rank just 118th in pass rush grade. Now, would that be the first time that a number is off or that I don't agree with on Pro Football Focus? No, it wouldn't be, but that certainly seems to be a pretty gigantic difference. And what that tells me is that a lot of their sacks are not coming from, just defensive ends winning individually necessarily, or having, a Sean Oakman or an Andrew Billings or one of these, NFL defensive linemen. It's coming from Dave Aranda dialing up good blitzes. And keep in mind, that's where he made his money before he was the head coach of Baylor. Defensive coordinator, really successful defensive coordinator. And so he's really good at finding good blitzes and dialing those up at the key moments. So for Kansas, who ranks 43rd nationally in pass blocking grade on Pro Football Focus, so they've been, above average at it so far. You have to be able to pick up the blitz. That comes from a lot of different ways. It comes from, the offensive line being smart. It comes from the play calling. It comes from Bryce Foster pointing things out. It comes from Jalon Daniels pointing things out. It comes from Jalon noticing it and knowing where to go in his hot route or scrambling away from it. There's a lot of ways you can overcome the pressure, but they have to be able to do it in this game. And Baylor ranks just 115th in coverage grade on Pro Football Focus. So if you can identify the blitz, have the right play, or find the right solutions, there is going to be opportunities there, but it's got to be done first. Third down, Kansas offense on third down. Kansas leads the Big 12 in third down conversion rate at 51%. They're also fourth nationally in third/fourth down success rate, so a combination of the two. Baylor, meanwhile, they're second in the Big 12 in third down conversion defense at just 34%. Like Dave Aranda is very good at dialing stuff up in those third down situations. They are just 51st, though, nationally in third and fourth down success rate. So I don't know what has led to kind of the difference there. Something's got to give regardless. Add to the intrigue, this is where that matchup of Jeff Grimes versus Dave Aranda really comes into focus a little bit more. Kansas needs to stay good on third down if you want to win on the road. Fourth down, preventing a big special teams return. Baylor has a kick return touchdown this season. They also lead the Big 12 in yards per punt return. They're averaging 20 yards per punt return. That's an unbelievable number. So obviously there was that funny story last week from Damon Greaves. If you missed it, it was that Damon Greaves' family came over from Australia to see him play. I think it was the first game they'd seen him play because he didn't get on the field. He didn't get to punt. So they come all the way from Australia. It was a great game for Kansas overall as a team, but they didn't need to punt. So his family came out and didn't get to see him punt, which is, again, a good team problem for Kansas, but unfortunate for them. Well, he needs to be ready to go in this one because, as I mentioned, they lead the Big 12 in yards per punt return. Kansas ranks 16th in the conference, dead last in net yards per punt. Now, not all of that is on Damon Greaves. That's net yards per punt. If you go by yards per punt, they're more in the middle to upper half of the league. But if you go by net yards per punt coverage for KU hasn't been very good this season. Now, a lot of times with punt returns, because you might only give up 15, 20, 25 punt returns in a season. If you give up one long punt return or two long punt returns or one punt return touchdown, that can skew the numbers. And we saw like KU give up that punt return, the long one to TCU, and there have been a couple other ones in there, but it hasn't been a great unit so far for KU. Gulp on this one. Can you hold up in the punt return game? Our player matchup, it's Devin Neal going against Keaton Thomas. Neal's going to do everything in his power for Kansas to win this game, right? Regardless of whether Kansas wins or loses this game, I feel like Devin Neal is going to get every ounce of effort, every possible inch that he possibly can. He's going to do everything in his power for Kansas to win this game. Keaton Thomas has been a really good linebacker for Baylor. He's rated a 75 overall on PFF. He has a team-high 97 tackles. And if you look at Big 12 linebackers with 500 or more snaps this year, he's the third highest graded across the entire conference. Awesome linebacker, awesome running back. Should be a ton of fun in that matchup both ways. All right, let's finish up Hawks to Soar KU players we think are set up to have big games. This is Locked on Jayhawks. This episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com and you can join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. You can get it on Kansas, who opened up as a 1.5-point dog. At the time of recording, they've moved to a 1.5-point favorite. You can do that at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL and the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to check out our KU Furman preview for basketball as well. We'll have some postcasts for the KU Baylor and KU Furman games as well coming up this weekend right here with Locked On Jayhawks. All right, our Hawks to soar. These are players we think are set up to have big games for KU. Offensive end of the ball, like honestly, I thought about making this Devin Neal, even though Baylor has a good run defense, good linebackers, just because like he's going to do everything in his power. This could be his final KU game. He's going to leave it all on the field. But because they have a good run defense, and because I like this matchup as well, let's go with Luke Grimm for the offensive side of the ball for KU. Baylor's main slot corner is Carl Williams IV. He has just a 61 Pro Football Focus grade right now and just a 58 mark in coverage. He's been targeted 45 times this season. He's allowed 30 catches for 256 yards. He has no interceptions so far on the year. I think this is a matchup that, Grimm, it's his last game too, potentially. Hopefully there's another one for KU, but this is a game where, Jalon's going to be looking to him on the road, key moments. He's been good really all season long for KU. I think he performs well in this one down in Waco. On the defensive side of the ball, we're going to go with Cornell Wheeler / JB Brown. When you look at Baylor, they run the ball up the middle a lot. And they've got those two really good running backs. They've got a stable of good backs. That's going to put a lot of pressure on the linebackers to make plays, to make tackles. And I think they're both going to rack up a good amount of tackles in this game. So you look at it, Bryson Washington has 91 runs between the tackles so far this season, compared to 53 of his runs coming outside of the tackles, which means 63% of Bryson Washington's runs this year have been between the tackles. For Dawson Pendergrass, he also, about 63% of his runs this year have been between the tackles. Not a comparison, just to show you, because, that means nothing. That means nothing, right? Like, what is the reference point there? Well, Devin Neal gets about 53% of his runs this year between the tackles. So that's a sizable jump, 10% more for both Baylor running backs coming between the tackles than what Devin Neal is averaging, who has some of those wide zone plays and gets to the outside. So if you're running up the middle, that means a lot of work for the linebackers, a lot of opportunity to rack up a lot of tackles. And I think Cornell Wheeler has been good as a run defender. I think JB Brown's been great as a run defender. The big questions I have for the KU linebackers is more so in coverage and in space. But if you're going to run it right at them, I think that's a little bit better for the KU linebackers in this matchup. So I could see both of them or either one of them having a big day in terms of racking up a lot of tackles. That'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. We'll be back to postcast whatever happens in this one, KU Furman, where you can check out the preview here as well with Locked On Jayhawks. We'll see you next time with LOJ. Happy Thanksgiving.